Right, the tech seems to be working, so good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Paul Heinrich. I'm chairing this meeting of the Development Committee this morning. If you haven't attended one of these meetings before, officers who provide and present our reports and offer technical advice sit either side of me at the top table. In front of me in the central area sit the members of the committee who will be making decisions on the items on the agenda. And officers, please introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Lyon. I'm a Development Manager.
Good morning, Claire Shopland from Democratic Services.
Mark Brown, Senior Planner, here to present the first item.
Good morning, Emma Hallams, Democratic Services team.
Good morning, David Addy, Environmental Protection.
Morning, Olivia Luckhurst, Senior Planning Officer.
Good morning, Russell Stock, Senior Planning Officer.
And finally, Russell Williams, Assistant Director for Planning.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to welcome members of the public attending and those who are viewing this meeting remotely. If you have registered to speak, I will call you to the front to the end of this bench at the appropriate time. Before we get into the formal business, the usual notices. Fire alarm, we are not expecting a drill today, so if the alarm does sound, it is for real. So in which case, follow officers via the marked exits and make your way to the car park at the front or to the flagpole at the rear of the building. Obviously, do not use the lift, which is out of action anyway today. If you have a mobile phone, which I'm sure you all do, please could you switch it off or to silent? I did remember myself this time. If required, we'll take a short break at around 11. And if the application is still under consideration at that time, I would just remind members of the public not to speak to councillors. And finally, toilets are out in the foyer. I expect people have found those already. So if we can now go to apologies, please.
Yes, none received.
Thank you. No substitutes. Minutes of the meeting of the 6th of March. You'll note that we still have not had the earlier minutes. You clearly understand the sort of rapid changes within Democratic Services, and there's a bit of a delay in getting those. So we've only got the 6th of March. Are there any amendments or corrections required on those minutes? I'm sure you've all read them, and I'm not going to waste time going through them in detail. Nope. Can I take it we accept those? Just show of hands, please. Thank you. Mr. Williams, we'd just like to update on a couple of issues, the McCarthy and Stone in Sheringham that we deferred and the progress on the application in High Kelling.
So we thought in discussion with the chair, it might be useful from time to time to just provide an update on where we are with applications that you've considered and deferred. So this is the first of this sort of trial. If you think it's a complete waste of time, do tell me afterwards and we can do something different. Last financial year, you deferred 6 items in total across the whole year, 2 of which so far have been reported back. 1 you've got today, which is the first item in Holt. And then we've got another 3 which we're expecting to come to one of the 2 May meetings at the moment. So 1 was in Erpingham, 1 was in Cromer, and 1 is the Sheringham North application, which I'll comment on slightly fuller in a second. Last time you ended up deferring, following my advice, I suppose, the McCarthy and Stone application, just for awareness, and this isn't for debate. Since then, the applicant has effectively resubmitted a new red line plan, which includes the manoeuvring area to the north of the car parking spaces that became the subject of some debate. That has been reconsulted with the Upshur Court, I think it is Residents Association, etc. And currently I'm expecting that to be reported back to committee at the end of May. In relation to the High Kelling application that you considered last time, which wasn't deferred, you did give me authority to issue that approval subject to 2 issues being sorted kind of to my satisfaction. One related to visibility splay, and if I simplify it, going for the higher end of the visibility splay of 2 options. The applicant believes that is possible to achieve, but we're just having that checked with the Highway Authority at the moment. And the second one related to a contribution towards a scheme that would improve pedestrian safety for people wanting to cross that road. And we're still in discussions with the applicant on that. But broadly speaking, if the higher visibility display can't be achieved, then it would need to come back to committee. And if there isn't a contribution towards the pedestrian safety bit that I think is reasonable, then it would have to come back to committee. At the moment, I'm optimistic that it won't need to.
Thank you. Are there any items of urgent business? I have none.
No, none received.
Thank you. Order of business is as on the papers. Item 7, then declarations of interest, please. Do you have any, Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Yes, as regards item 11, it's in my particular ward. There is a reference to nutrient neutrality mitigation provision in the application. Just to declare that I'm on the Norfolk Mitigation Fund working party, as a member of that working party. So I'd just like to make that clear from this moment on.
Thank you.
I will be speaking to the application. I'm not predetermined, so I will be voting.
That's fine, Councillor. Councillor Beattie?
Family connection with item 8, so I need to leave the room.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vickers?
Yes, I just discovered this morning that I'm acquainted with the applicant for Walsingham 2612, but I haven't been lobbied in any way, and I consider myself free to vote and speak. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fine. Okay, let's move to the first substantive item, Holt PF 24/1760. Right, could we have the presentation, please?
Yeah, good morning, members. Yeah, so the application is for the retrospective permission for use of an existing outbuilding in the rear garden to food processing and cooking room for business use and extensions house refrigeration unit at 7 The Close in Holt. As set out in the report, is brought to committee as the applicant is related to a local member. Sorry. So this is the site location plan and aerial, showing it's within sort of the residential area within the Holt settlement boundary. These are the site plans. So as I say, the outlined area shows the location of the outbuilding. The site adjoins the neighbouring boundary of number 8 to the south and around 11 metres to the neighbouring boundaries to the north and east, just for context. So these are the elevations of the outbuilding and the chiller unit. And these are the details of the revised extraction system, which has been reviewed by the environmental protection team, and the comments provided is based on the revised system with concerns outstanding as set out in the officer's report. So this is a photograph of the front of the property from the street scene. So it's set down sort of a small close with similar properties of semi-detached nature. It's the property to the left with a fence gate at the front. And this is the view at the rear of the property with the outbuilding and the chiller unit and sort of the associated crab pot equipment also visible from this shot too. So this photo shows the inside of the processing room in the outbuilding on the right-hand side. And this shows the inside of the boiling room. It's the, as set on the report, it's the cooking aspect and odours and noise from this aspect of the proposal which forms the main concerns raised regards the impact on neighbouring amenity. So the main issues with this application is sort of balancing it between supporting a local fishing business against the impact of the cooking processes on neighbouring residential amenity. I say as such, the officer's recommendation is to refuse, as it's not considered an appropriate scale or use given the residential nature of the site and surroundings, and has not been demonstrated there is sufficient noise or odour abatement that would otherwise mitigate the impact of the commercial processes involved and create an unacceptably adverse impact on neighbouring amenity, contrary to local policy considerations and the NPPF. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two speakers. If we can start with Gemma Harrison from Holt Town Council, please. The usual 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I'm Gemma Harrison. I'm the Town Clerk of Holt Town Council. I'm here today to read a statement on behalf of Holt Town Council in support of this application. Holt Town Council recognise the challenges involved in setting up a new business, especially in the current financial climate. The applicants are asking for an opportunity from NNDC to be able to build a new business using their existing skills and experience from their home in Holt. Holt Town Council are satisfied that the odour concerns raised by NNDC's Environmental Protection Team have been successfully mitigated with the proposed installation of an air filter, details of which are included in the Environmental Impact Statement. The Town Council does note the two conflicting odour assessments which have been carried out, one by the applicant and the other by NNDC's Environmental Team. Having read both, it is difficult to ascertain which one most accurately predicts the impact of any odour. Therefore, town councillors would ask for members to consider granting temporary consent, which would allow Environmental Team to monitor the situation using live data over an agreed period of time. Town councillors feel the most accurate evidence is that submitted by the neighbours of 3 The Driftway. The evidence states that there has been some activities already carried out on site with minimal odour. This is without the proposed air filter. The neighbours write in full support of the application. There have been no objections raised by neighbours. Therefore, the community, along with NNDC's Economic Development Team, are supporting this new business venture. It should be remembered also that North Norfolk is renowned for its fishing heritage. These operations would have historically been commonplace throughout our communities, and supporting a new business which looks to continue a generational occupation should be supported. The Town Council hope the applicant is successful with this application and that the business flourishes. And in time, they're able to relocate to a larger unit elsewhere in the town. Therefore, the Town Council asks members to approve this application and give the applicants the helping hand they need to start their new business.
Thank you. There are no objecting speakers. I have one supporting speaker, Sarah Chambers. Three minutes, are you ready?
My husband has been a fisherman for more than 24 years after leaving school at 15 with no qualifications. During this time, he successfully rang Norfolk Sea Larder with no complaints. The premises had a full-size version of our proposed filtration system. It includes charcoal filters and can handle odours created through the cooking of crustaceans. We, along with our filter company, believe that it is more than sufficient for the small building in which it is to be installed. It will only operate while we are cooking our crabs. It also has a very low noise threshold to prevent causing a nuisance to the neighbours. We strive to be as environmentally and economically friendly as possible and aim to produce our food in a responsible manner. It was suggested that we cook off-site, but we believe in doing so would add food miles and increase the risk of cross-contamination of our product. We also believe that the cost of an external premises at this time would make the business unviable in the current economical environment. Like most small businesses, fishing is a small cottage industry struggling to survive. Many older crab producers are retiring and are close to retirement age. Many young people cannot afford to enter the industry due to the increasing costs of their boats, equipment, etc. We know this more than anyone after having our outboard stolen, costing us £13,000 to replace. We only trade for a maximum of 8 months a year. The weather plays a major part in the days that we are allowed to fish. 3 people are relying on our business: my husband, myself, and our 16-year-old son, who has recently left school and completed his fish and safety training courses. Our premises was visited for close to 1 hour in December, not 2.5 hours as stated in the report. No processing was taking place as it was out of season. The only thing that they could hear was with a refrigeration unit running, which makes minimal noise. The report states that we have no consideration for our neighbours, particularly in terms of noise and odours. Our neighbours disagree and are supportive of what we are doing. We have had 0 complaints during our first season of trading, and there is currently no extraction system in place. We have mesh grates on the drains, so no debris from the cleaning or cooking enters the drainage system. The report mentions a sewerage problem, which is incorrect. The only problem there has ever been was caused by a previous tenant flushing sanitary ware down the toilet. The report also states that we are a large-scale operation. We operate the smallest boat on the coast. In this industry, daily sales of 100 to 200 crabs is a tiny scale operation. A large scale would be producing substantially more. I have health problems, which unfortunately means that I'm unable to commit to full-time work. I really need this business to work. We do not intend to expand this business further at this site. If we plan to in the future, which we don't, we would make sure that we were away from our home. This is our livelihood and our only trade. We just want to make a living doing what we know and we love and we have experience in. Lastly, I would like to make you aware of an application PF 230678 recently approved by Mr. Brands of a similar scale to what we're doing. We would hope that you would consider our application favourably. If you have any questions and we are able to answer them, we are happy to do so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Right, the local member clearly is unable to present on this relative to the applicant. Therefore, we don't get to that statement. This raises a number of questions. And, we clearly should be looking to support small businesses, but then again, we have to consider the environmental impacts of those businesses. 2 things noticeable. One, that there has not been any complaints, any objections from neighbours, which is unusual, to say the least. And the other is the other application the applicant's referred to. I was able to comment on that before we go into debate. The other application that was approved, I believe it's in Bodham. Just trying to find it.
Yeah, so there was a case, obviously, each on its own, each case on its own merits, and obviously with that one, there was quite a more restrictive condition on operating and frequency. So here, obviously, the model, obviously, as it was discussed on site about whether sort of restrictive conditions on the frequency and scale could be considered, but they said it wouldn't be possible for their business model. And obviously, the context is a bit different because the one in Bodham was sort of adjacent to a village hall. Well, obviously, it was a neighbouring setting too, but there was quite more restrictions on the scale of operation that they agreed to. Whereas obviously that hasn't been indicated that could be possible here because they need a scale to support their operation. So they are different. They are different in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Members. Yes, Councillor Netherway.
Thank you, Chair. I have a lot of sympathy with situations like this. I started a small company and took it further. and I would like to see opportunities given to people to do the same. I have several questions, but the one I'd like to ask first of all, mate, is there have been no objections from local residents. Over what period of time?
So just as a bit of context, obviously this came in following enforcement last year. So I don't think they've had like a full season in operation yet. So I don't think they've had that full scale yet to sort of fully assess that. Because in that on the report there was a pre-app where the council indicated wouldn't support, but obviously for business reasons they had to proceed. So I don't think there's been a full crabbing season where they've done that yet, but they might be able to clarify that point. But I don't think there's been a full scale operation yet.
You satisfied, Councillor Netherway? Okay, Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seems to me that the problem is the odour and the scale of it. As the speech that we just listened to, they're proposing a carbon filter system in. Are you convinced that won't sort this problem out, or are you still?
So I'll say we've got an environmental protection officer, so he might be better placed to. Obviously, he's got comments setting out why a carbon filter would be inappropriate for the type of odour produced and not possible. So it might be better for our environmental health officer to.
Yes, I'd agree. What is your opinion, please?
Thank you. I'm presenting for one of our officers. He couldn't make it here today. So the thoughts about the odour abatement system, and obviously the applicants have done good work to develop it during the course of the application, but the concerns are that what was presented was bag filtration, which we don't see would be relevant for an odorous and also wet emissions. What the most odorous stuff is what are called volatile organic compounds. So it's different, but if you can imagine like the really stuff that is easy to get into the air, like alcohol or fuel or something like that. So the amines, which from the crab, we're thinking would pass through the filtration, then go into the air in the environment. So although carbon filtration is a very good system, it's more suited for probably less wet odour emissions, more fatty type ones you'd find in pubs and restaurants. So that's the concern about it not being effective for the close proximity environment.
Okay, could I just come a question there? You say it's not effective. Are there systems that you would consider effective?
Would consider other systems. I mean, the effectiveness of this one hasn't been demonstrated. I did help and I did direct officer to look, and to be honest, in literature there is not a great deal of examples that can be done there. We're very familiar with all the odour guidance, and it's more around restaurants rather than processing highly volatile wet odour sources such as crab boiling.
So in other words, you can't specifically say that the system will not work. Only that from the literature it would indicate that it probably wouldn't.
Yeah, it's there's the element of doubt there, really. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vickers.
Thanks. I think it's the instinct of most of us to support start-up businesses and small businesses. And obviously the town council feel the same way about this. I know this is a retrospective application, so the proof of the pudding is in the eating. There haven't been any complaints from neighbours. I'd like to ask the applicant, if I may, Chairman, how long they've been cooking.
So it's pretty much been a whole season during that time, in which time we had no complaints at all.
Thank you. Useful.
Whether that was without the filter, wasn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Where are we got to? Mr. Holiday, hand up.
Thank you, Chair. It was suggested that there was a temporary permission given by the town council. Is that a possibility to test out this new system?
Could I ask Officer Lynders?
Yeah, so the guidance from government is that yes, we can issue temporary planning permissions, and the examples that they give are where you wanted to test or to see whether an impact of a development will come about. So the sort of circumstances that I think was envisaged for temporary permissions is probably what we're talking about here, where we're not 100% clear whether the impacts in terms of odour will actually materialise. We've heard the sort of the theory behind the odour concerns, but it's putting that into practice. So if that was a decision of this committee that you would want to support the business and allow for a temporary period, then there's nothing to stop you in law from doing so. Obviously, we would need to be prescriptive in terms of how long you would be giving temporary planning permission for, and what would happen at the end of that temporary period. But there's nothing to stop you if the committee were minded to make that decision to grant a temporary permission.
Thank you. Since you wish to respond, Councillor?
Because I think emotionally we're all behind this, but it's scientifically, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the evidence. So I would propose that actually. People would
Okay, you're well aware of the procedures. We have to
Yes,
reject the
okay.
recommendation
When we get
first
to
and
that
then come
stage,
back with
yes.
an alternative. Who have I got next? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am fully on board with what has been said. We would like to support a fledgling business. I'm just slightly confused in that we have a system clearly in place that's been consented in Bodham. And I'm unclear still as to the difference between the two filter systems, the one in Bodham and the one that's been proposed here, in terms of what this doesn't do that the one at Bodham does that allowed the consent. So that for me is a confusion. I've noted that there are no objections from neighbours, there's support from the town council. I think there's a lot of merit if it's legally possible, and it sounds as though it is from what Officer Lyon has just said, that we give it a temporary licence for the full crab season. That I think would be the limit. So we can test it, from the start of the season to the end of the season, and see how we go. That had the added bonus of being slightly consistent with our previous decision, which was only in February this year, I understand.
But I'd say with that one, obviously in association with the Environmental Protection Team, there was quite restricted, because obviously here there would be 5 days a week, 10 till 2, whereas the other place I think it was sort of 2 or 3 times a week and a lot reduced cooking duration. So I say that there was quite more restrictive conditions on that one. So this one's a lot more uncontrolled compared to the bottom one.
I can just come back, but surely it's a filtration system that will work 5 days a week in Bodham, but they choose to only work 2.
But
we don't have a filtration system that only works for a limited number of days.
But I say
it doesn't.
It's the filter, but also a combination of the scale and intensity and frequency of use of it. I think might be something Environmental Protection Officer can maybe clarify, because I'll set on the comment.
Yeah, we have the condition on that.
Yeah. So this is the application that was referred to, PF 230678. So that had a condition that says cooking of the crustaceans shall only be permitted up to twice a week on separate days, and the cooking duration should not exceed 2 hours on any day, and should not take place on weekends or bank holidays. And says the fumes shall be dispersed through the charcoal filter and chimney, as per details in a risk assessment, and the occupant shall maintain the filtration extraction equipment in line with the manufacturer's requirements. There's other bits, but I won't go into that. But so there's a baseline been set there with the bottom scheme. Clearly, it's quite different in the sense that the number of days and cooking duration are quite restrictive compared to what's before you today. So there's obviously quite a margin of difference there, but clearly with a temporary permission, you could assess the impact of those additional hours should you choose to do so.
Thank you. Any further comment, Councillor Brown?
I think my thoughts remain the same. I think we should suck it in and see, so to speak, to use the vernacular, and proceed on a temporary licence planning or planning consent basis, and then we have the Environmental Protection Team give us an analysis at the end of the period.
Yeah, I sense where the opinion's going. We have a number of other people wishing to speak. Councillor Fitz-Tillett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it quite extraordinary that here we are in the most famous place for crabs, that our environmental health doesn't understand the filtration systems. And I would request that they go and do a bit more research and perhaps instead of looking at guidebooks, actually go out and look at them. However, I'm in support of everything else that people have said about temporary, and I'm sure we will prove that they are very good neighbours and that and I hope their business flourishes.
Thank you. Councillor John Toy. Oh, yeah. You want to speak as well, Councillor Kay Toy?
Yeah. Okay, am I on? Yeah. Right. Excuse me for my naivety about crabs. Don't like crabs anyway, but sorry. But how do you actually assess odours? Is it a sniff method, or is there some more system of technical assessment for it? Can that be answered?
Yep. So the assessment of odours would be a subjective odour, either if it was done as a nuisance assessment or if there was some sort of planning condition underway and officer did it. There are other systems. It wouldn't be appropriate for this, but say like where I've looked into sewage treatment works, so I've required abatements of 2 major sewage works. You can do field tests. So you can have multiple officers taking observations and you can try and quantify it. You can also take extractive, so volumes of air, take it to a lab, and you can have a panel of people smelling it at different dilutions, and that way you can quantify it in European odour units. You take that and you can also assess what's called the hedonic tone, which is the offensiveness of the odour, and come up with an assessment. But this, it is a a relatively small process, so it would be pretty much a sniff test, subjectively how bad you think it is, essentially. So if this was operating, we'd do that if we were asked to.
Okay. So yeah, I'm in support of this so long as we have a temporary planning concession or permission, and that it is reviewed. And I've just got one more question. Will it be reviewed once they've gone through that initial trial? Would it ever be reviewed in the future? Is it regularly these sort of, or do we trust in the business owners to actually maintain the filters? And is it reviewed, or do we just wait for neighbours or anybody else, members of the public, to complain about any odours?
Right. There's a bit of a middle ground here. So clearly there's going to be partly reliant on feedback we get from neighbours. That's partly how we sort of differentiate whether people have concerns, but also our colleagues in environmental health may have to go out and do some field research and clean their noses out and do a sniff test by the sounds of it. But clearly there's going to be a need for some kind of qualitative data or quantitative data on the ground to understand what is the actual impact. Because if we grant a temporary permission and we're back here again in 6 to 8 months' time at the end of the crabbing season, deciding whether to give a permanent permission, what would be the factor that would be the difference between a permission and not granting a permission? So we need to understand what's the evidence that we require to be convinced that this system or any systems work. So that's the key sort of question. And obviously the other question is, how long would you grant a temporary permission for, and how long would be required to gain the necessary information to give you confidence that this is an acceptable scheme in planning terms?
Well, can I chip in from a slightly different perspective? So if I try and approach Councillor Toy's question from a different perspective, should this council, or indeed any council, grant 1 year, 2 year, whatever temporary approvals repeatedly? The answer is basically no. Okay, so personal view, if you go down the temporary route, I agree with Mr. Lyon, fine in principle. Okay, no issue with that. But at the end of that period, assuming the applicant wishes to continue and therefore makes another application, the decision should be, is it permanent because it's acceptable with appropriate conditions, or is it unacceptable as a consequence of the trial? There may be a scenario where it's not unreasonable to have a further temporary permission, but it's difficult to envisage what, but there might be one, but certainly it shouldn't be continually temporary. Personally, I would have thought, which ties in, I think, with what the applicant suggested, bearing in mind they've done nearly a full season already, that another full season would be an appropriate temporary period, which I guess would be roughly to the end of this calendar year to allow for the season to finish, if I've understood my dates correctly. I disagree slightly with Ms. Croxon on the 2-year bit, which isn't unreasonable, but personally I think 1 year would then provide enough information subject to that system being installed reasonably pronto.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got one concern. I think we're all wanting to support a local business and hope it's successful. But if you look at the location plan, the Treehouse, another successful small business where grandmums and the grandchildren go and eat at the Treehouse in a picnic situation, which is a successful business at the moment. Would this 1 year grant, if we give it, actually affect that business? And I think we need to, it's not that far away. I don't think it's the idea of this is surrounded by houses, but there is that tree house there. I think it houses the local food bank, and they have been very successful, and we have supported them with finance for play equipment. So I think we just need to consider that. And if we grant this permission for 12 months, that may be enough for this summer to affect them quite badly. And that's all I wanted to say. But certainly my underlying thoughts are to support this.
Yeah, I do think, yeah, you have to take note of the fact that business has been operating already and there have been no complaints. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chairman. I think they've already had a temporary, they've done a full season and had no complaints. The neighbours are supporting them. It's an area which is predominantly the business is crab fishing. I don't see the need for another temporary. And I believe in my house, I can measure VOCs with a device. And I think a device, there is a device for measuring VOCs that could be put there. But I know I've got one at my house. Thank you.
You'd want to put that as a condition if we were to go that way.
Well, I don't think it should be temporary, but I can understand if there was a device. I don't know what you call it. I've got a device in my house that measures the volatile organic compounds or whatever it's called, and it's not very expensive. I don't know if that's a commercially used thing or not, but surely that would be better than a temporary measure and making it permanent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor John Toyer, or the right toy this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've got a few things to go through. It's already been mentioned about how traditional and fishermen's cottages and how they've all, if we think of a row of fishermen's cottages, they were always close together and this kind of work was going on. And we know that's part of our history and our heritage. And I believe with modern mitigation, there's obviously been lots made about that. I think we need to understand how it's measured. The officer's report talks about balancing the needs of the fishing industry, or support for the fishing industry against environmental health concerns. I didn't see any mention, apart from the applicant, about how it supports the industry. We've kind of ignored that fact but actually it does support the industry. It is bringing people on. We've heard how there's a youth involved here, and it keeps the industry going. So that kind of isn't in the report to offer that balance, which is what I think we need here to offer that balance. So I'd like to thank officers for their reports. But I would like to raise some comments. Even in the latest report, it talks about obnoxious odour. So good old Mr. Google. Obnoxious odour is a smell that is extremely unpleasant and offensive, causing annoyance or disgust, and often used to describe a very foul or repulsive scent. Judgment taken without actually smelling the process. Mr. Google again, I asked about is cooking crab worse, better than fish? And it says cooking crab generally doesn't smell worse than fish. And in some cases, the smell of cooked crab can be more pleasant, and that's without filtration. So I think that the measurement and the supposition, we talked about the filtration system, and the answer we got was, we are thinking it will get through. We don't know about the filtration. We're thinking it will get through. Actually, the company that designs the filtration are probably better qualified to say if it will work or not, and they've said it will. So I do think that there's, I don't want to say bias because that would be an unfair word, but I don't think that we've got the balance in the reports here that was necessary to make the appropriate decision. As we've all recognised, if it was obnoxious, which is a really strong, pungent smell, I think we'd have had complaints, and we haven't. And we're putting filtration on top of that to something that, when it's actually cooked, they actually say that actually crab meat can smell quite sweet, and those of us that do like crab will know that compared to fish. So I do think that I think that the committee is recognising that that's not necessarily the balance that we've got in this report, and it's not and whilst I recognise the challenges for environmental health, without there being measurements and it being subjective, therefore you get a difference. The applicant feels these are the numbers for this. Environmental health feel those are the numbers, because there's no subjective measurement, although we've heard there are certain ways of measuring certain things. So I think we should at least do the temporary, and my preference would be to actually approve this, and let's move on to help this industry to move on, because I don't think there's sufficient evidence here in balance, in my opinion, to stop this. Thank you.
Thank you. What to say, if we apply a sniff test to a lot of the industries around here, we'd be banning pig farming and muck spreading. But maybe I grew up on a farm, so I'm immune to it as a child. I also had family members who were involved in the fishing industry. So. Right, we have reached a slight impasse here. If we wish to move forward, we need to vote on the recommendation. And to do that, I will have to propose and second from the chair. And I would remind you that if you wish to refuse it, you vote against it. Just so everybody gets that straight. We have had issues in the past.
Sorry, just for the avoidance of doubt, the recommendation is for refusal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say for, you're voting for refusal. Okay. If you say against, you're voting against refusal, and we will move on to something else. So apologies to overlabour the point, but the recommendation is for refusal. For equals refusal.
Okay, we're all clear. That's the start. Right. Could you have a hammer or could you?
Yeah. Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Councillor Henrik.
Against.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor MacDonald.
Against.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Netherway.
Against.
Councillor J. Toy.
Against.
Councillor K. Toy.
Against.
Councillor Varley. Councillor Vickers.
Against.
Thank you. Okay, we can now move forward. Two members have indicated they would be happy to propose approval. or we can take approval on a temporary basis. So I'll leave it to you, members. You're proposing full approval,
I'm proposing.
subject to any conditions agreed with.
Yes.
officers. Thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder for full approval, subject to conditions to be agreed by officers. Which I presume I default to you, Williams.
So they would default to me. So just for me to run through and have clarity, then I just want to make a comment as well. So that would include the installation in a timely manner of the kit, in inverted commas. It would include appropriate operating hours, but that does need to be commensurate with what was applied for. And I think it would include, and I'm now speculating slightly, the installation of the requisite VOC reader kind of kit that Councillor MacDonald referred to as being a professional expert in that regard, but certainly some kind of monitoring kit in that regard. My observation, and this is not me trying to talk you out of anything, this is clearly the committee's decision, is if you go down a permanent route and at some point there is a problem with complaints from next door, then that's done. We're not able to retrofit something, with the possible exception of within environmental health related legislation, which is more difficult to do than the planning stuff from that perspective, whereas the temporary equally gives you the ability to use that as a test for a period, but fundamentally it might be fine for that period and then problematic thereafter. So it's a little bit of which do you call, but clearly Councillor MacDonald has proposed something. I think Councillor John Toy sort of half seconded that before, but those are the areas of condition that I think would need to be done, and as far as possible have some parallel with the other application that has been referred to previously.
Very quickly, Councillor Toy.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add to that. So yes, I think we need monitoring and we need it done before and after filtration as well. So there's an opportunity to continue, and obviously it needs to be installed in a timely manner. Therefore, we've got a benchmark that it's improved it, and then there's a level for us to maintain. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, do you want to add anything finally before we go to a vote?
Yep. So those who are proposing a temporary arrangement won't get a vote because we're now voting on a permanent arrangement. And if that's passed, the temporary arrangement completely falls. How does that work in terms of fairness? Because we've chosen two councillors who, I respect their views, are potentially in the minority, and we're ruling out a vote on an alternative that potentially, from the mood in the room, may have a majority. So I'm a little bit concerned here.
So it's for the chair to determine which order to take them in, but if you're voting on a permanent approval first, but you would bluntly prefer temporary, then you'd need to vote against the permanent. Shouldn't do this. Clearly, if I read the room, if you vote against permanent, you're almost certain to vote in favour of temporary.
Certainly don't abstain.
It'd be your right to do so, but yeah.
Okay, can we go to a vote then, please? The recommendation as advised and proposed by Councillor MacDonald, seconded by Councillor Vickers, is to grant full approval subject to the conditions as outlined by Officer Williams. Are we all clear on that?
So just to labour the point, for means permanently, for against doesn't mean you're against a temporary, because we'd move on to that as the next phase. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure we don't get anybody voting away they don't intend to.
Okay.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Fisher.
Against.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Councillor Henrik.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Councillor Netherway. Councillor J Toy.
4.
Councillor K Toy.
Full support, I'm going for.
Councillor Varley. Councillor Vickers.
4.
8 in 4, 4 against.
Okay, the application is approved, subject to conditions to be agreed. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 9, bottom PF/24/2531, reversion to a holiday accommodation. Stop when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. So yeah, as the Chairman just outlined, this application is the conversion of a building to a single unit of holiday accommodation. The application is before you today at the request of Councillor Ringer, and his reasons are set out on page 30 of the agenda. So the application site is located approximately 750 metres south of the core of Bodham. In terms of policy, there you go, got the plans there in front of you. So in terms of the policies that are being considered, SS2 supports tourism and recreation in the countryside, which this application is cited. Going beyond that, policy EC7, which looks at the location of tourism in our district, again supports tourism and sets out a sequential test. As part of that test, one of the options is conversion of existing buildings, which this is. So that's set out further in policy EC2, which supports the reuse of existing buildings for economical purposes, including tourism accommodation. So in principle, as set out within the report, the proposal has been found to be acceptable in line with those policies. Policy EC9 relates to tourism accommodation and seeks to secure conditions to ensure that the development is holiday accommodation and sets out a number of restrictions there. And that is one of the conditions that have been proposed as part of this application. Moving on to landscape and design impacts, the proposal would result in a degree of domestication of the site. At the moment, as you'll see as we go through the photos, it's fairly well concealed within the verdant landscape and behind the fence in there. So the proposal to open that up a bit and remove some of the landscaping would result in a degree of domestication. But as set out in the report, that's mitigated to a degree by the proposed soft and hard landscaping proposals, which would result in a visual improvement of the site in officers' views. External lighting would be limited to 2 downlighters, and that is controlled by condition. And the external changes to the building itself are fairly limited and considered to be appropriate for the context.
Could we see the
In terms of the structural works required to convert the building, there's a structural report was submitted with the application, and it highlights that the building is in fairly good condition, and some minor internal structural timbers would be required. But externally, the changes are limited only to replacing the front door with bifolds, and I think the roof is going to be altered as well, and some minor fenestration changes, but it largely would remain as it appears today. From a highway point of view, access point of view, its location weighs against it. It's fairly isolated, so there would be a high likelihood that the private car would be used. And that does weigh against the application. Access would be upgraded, and highways have considered both those elements and are happy with the proposal. New gates and surfacing would be provided as part of those highway works, and suitable parking would be provided within the site. Ecologically, reports have been provided to demonstrate that the development would have no adverse impacts, and enhancement and mitigation measures would be secured by condition. Biodiversity net gain would likely have to be delivered off-site, given the scale of the site and the ability to provide that. And that would again be a pre-commencement requirement on any permission. In terms of trees, as I mentioned, the site is fairly well surrounded by trees, and the application has been supported by an ecological and arboricultural impact assessment, and there would be the removal of a few trees to enable the development to take place. Having considered the sort of amended versions of that through the application, the tree officers raised no objection. And like I mentioned before, there's a substantial replanting scheme being proposed as part of the soft landscaping works. Drainage details would be secured by condition. Air source heat pumps and solar panels would be provided and help reduce carbon emissions. So in turning to the planning balance, as set out on page 41, there's a number of limited harms, including the sort of the prevalence of car use that would come from the location of this site, and the domestication impacts resulting from the changes. However, these aren't considered to outweigh the benefits that the conversion of the building into economic purposes would bring. So the recommendation is for approval and is subject to a number of conditions set out on page 42 to 48 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever seen such a long list of conditions for a relatively minor application, but there we go. I have two speakers. Councillor Ringer, I believe you're going to speak as both parish chair and local member. You wish to speak from there, or are you going to come to the front?
I'm happy to speak from here. Thank you. So yeah, as you say, I'm both the chair of the parish council and the district member, so I will amalgamate my contributions just in the interest of expedience. Although it says that it is an existing building, it doesn't have an existing use class, and I think that is something that is might be of note to councillors. In the past, it has been a car workshop, a sawmill, an agricultural building ancillary to the land adjoining it, and a storage unit for a company that operated outside bars. So it's been a bit of everything. My comments are going to focus on three key areas: the property type and the housing impact, the landscape and environmental constraints, and the highways and road safety element. I'll start with the type of development that's being proposed. So Bodham is a village that is already experiencing a significant oversaturation of holiday lets and second homes. And once social housing is excluded, about 25% of the village's housing stock now falls into this category, which is well above both the district and national averages. And this is already having a clear and damaging effect on the sustainability and cohesion of the community. And policy EC7 of the makes it clear that new tourist accommodation should not lead to unacceptable concentration or harm to the residential character of the settlement, and we believe that that threshold has already been exceeded in Bodham, and this proposal will make that worse. The justification for the change is also a bit unconvincing. I have seen it said that the applicant has claimed the building can't revert, for example, to agricultural use due to the internal works that took place 10 or more years ago. But this is obviously in contradiction to their own recent certificate of lawfulness application, which sought to formalise that exact usage. The parish council and myself, I think, would rather see the building used for agricultural or for economic purposes, or even as a dwelling for a rural worker. These uses bring lasting value to the community, and a holiday let is firmly at the bottom of that list, bringing minimal benefit while increasing pressure on housing and infrastructure. Turning to landscape, it's been mentioned that the site is very heavily wooded, and officers have previously advised that the extent of tree cover would constrain development. In fact, officers told me directly that if this was for a permanent dwelling, it would be refused on landscape grounds, because the pressure to remove trees for light, for views, and for access would be too great. But at the same time, that is considered acceptable simply because the use is short term for people staying a week. My view is that is too tenuous a distinction and too risky a justification for approval. The impact on the landscape doesn't disappear just because the guests check out on a Saturday. Highway has been mentioned as something that works against this, and actually I think it's been really understated, the impact here. So The proposed access is just 100 or so metres from 8 existing properties, including those occupied with families, young children, older residents, people with disabilities, and there's no footway between there and the main village. So the road falls under national speed limit. People have to walk into the village from there, and introducing additional vehicle movements, especially from short-term visitors unfamiliar with the area, raises concerns. One point of interest here is that the report on highways claim the development would generate just 3 vehicle movements per day. That's a bit strange. It's an odd number, suggesting that someone's going to go out and not come back. It's absolutely mad. It is a drastic underestimation. Doesn't consider cleaners, deliveries, changeovers, or the fact that obviously typically that holidaymakers go out several times a day and do tend to return. And I think that councillors here will recognise that that is unrealistic. And that alone, I think, should be a reason enough to defer the application to ask the applicant and or highways to take a look at that specific point. A decision involving safety should not be based on figures that clearly do not reflect real world use and could realistically tip the planning balance if accurately reported. Another distinction here compared with a permanent dwelling is the complete lack of reference to sustainable transport options. If this were a residential application, we'd expect to see something along the lines of that, sustainable transport, and it would probably be recommended for refusal because of the lack of it, but because it's a holiday let, it doesn't matter. It's a worrying inconsistency. The application is poorly justified, poorly located, in conflict with policies EC7, SS2 and EN4, does nothing for the long-term future of Bodham, would result in harm to its environment, infrastructure and community. The Parish Council have said that they are open-minded about the development proposals that may come forward, perhaps contrary to policy where there's a clear and recognised benefit to the local community, but this application fails to demonstrate that. Brings no meaningful gain, only additional pressure and risk. Thank you.
Well timed, Councillor Ringer. I have no objecting speakers, 1 supporting speaker, Will Beeson. You care to come to the microphone at the front, please? You have three minutes.
Good morning. My name is Will Beeson and I'm the applicant. By way of background, I was brought up in Norfolk and lived in Bodham for 10 years until 2020 with my wife and 3 children, where they grew up. I have been active in the local community, having previously been a member of the Bodham Parish Council for several years, taking a keen interest in development within the village. I purchased the property in 2014. My wish was to improve both the building and the landscaping and to make it a pleasant place to walk past along Hart Lane. The building has been there for many years and shows on Google Maps going back to 1990. The site is part of the parish of Bodham and has had a range of different vehicles going in and out of it since World War II. The building is soundly constructed and has benefited from a level of insulation and plumbing previously installed. It has an Anglian water domestic supply for which I am billed at the site address and postcode and has a suitable area for parking and garden. Our proposal is to maintain the existing single-storey footprint and enhance the building and the site through appropriate development, which meets the required planning policies set out in the officer's report. We intend to use a local building firm in Sheringham and to meet all modern building standards. We asked NNDC to undertake a Silver Service pre-app report and were very pleased with the detailed and helpful document Russell Stocks produced, which we have followed and used as a guide to the submission of this proposal. The local structural engineers report confirmed that the existing building is suitable for conversion. We have also satisfied the landscape, highways and environmental requirements in accordance with local planning policies SS2, EN4 and EC7. The officers who have been part of this application are experts in their field, and I would ask that the Planning Committee support their recommendation to approve the application. With regard to tourism, the application fully complies with policies EC7 and EC2. Bodham has 22 second homes and 21 holiday lets, which represents only 16% of the total properties in the village. This is similar to the North Norfolk district average and lower than most towns and villages close to the coast. In summary, the property will be greatly improved with attractive native hedging and trees surrounding it and a 5-bar front gate replacing the existing unattractive clapboard fencing. In addition, it will bring business to the Red Hart in Bodham and to the surrounding area.
I'll have to stop you there. Thank you. Return to your seat.
Thank you.
Okay. Over to you, members. Where do you wish to start? All right, at once. Councillor Toy.
Yeah, difficult to balance. Understand the need for affordable homes, but in terms of traffic, where I've seen it, it's had uses before that have generated traffic. I did notice in the pictures it's quite a wide verge. We know that doesn't get trimmed as much nowadays for good reasons. I understand the local members' comments, which I've read for the reason for calling in. It is difficult living in a rural location and seeing in places going there, but this is not someone's just repurposing a building to make some use, which hopefully with the right encouragement, we actually could get people walking the half a mile to the pub and to the bus, which runs past there, and it's a really frequent thing. So I think that's something that perhaps the applicant could consider in their advertising it, the ability of local transport. But it is a balance. I think in this case, officers have come to the right balance, and I'd be happy to propose.
Thank you. Councillor Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to thank the case officer for the report this morning. I also want to thank the local member for his contribution. It's really important to get that perspective, and of course, get the perspective from the applicant as well. It ensures that we, have a full picture and can make a more informed decision this morning. I think the balance really has been sought, and I can see through the relevant aspects within the report. Certainly for landscaping and replanting, that's really encouraging. I'm glad that it's going to be native species of hedging and plants and such. Really encouraged by the energy efficiency aspects, the heat pumps, the solar panels, but of course the fabric first measures as well. That's fantastic. And the fact that if we are minded to pass this application today, we will decrease the risk and mitigate by having those string of conditions there. So with all of that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I'm more than happy to support this application and will be seconding the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? No, in which case we'll go to the vote, please. Mind you, the recommendation is for approval. That's a very long list of conditions. You want that, vote for it.
Councillor Beatty.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
For.
Councillor Netherway. Councillor J-Toy.
For.
Councillor K-Toy. For. Councillor Varley. Councillor Vickers. For.
Application is approved. Where are we? 2211. We'll move on then to next item on our agenda. Melton Constable PF/23, isn't it? Oh, I jumped one. I have. I've jumped one. Sorry, next one is Walsingham /PF24/2612. Some of you will recall this one having been before us in various guises before. It does appear that issues have been resolved. So lots of satisfaction, but we'll take the report, please, Olivia.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors. So, yeah, this is a full application seeking permission for the erection of a two-storey detached dwelling. The application comes into us after a previous refusal on the site back in 2021 and a dismissed appeal in 2023. The current proposal, you can see here, located within the red line, proposes a revised site layout from what was previously applied for. So this is the current proposal. And this one here, oh, I did have an amended plan slide on there. I might be able to get that for you after the presentation, just to show you what was on the previous application. So this is the current site proposal. So we've got a detached dwelling with parking to the front and an access created by utilising an existing access at the site. An aerial view showing you where the site is positioned in relation to number 18, which is the grade 2 listed building. Proposed elevations and floor plans. So these are the photos looking east into the site, and you can see the timber gates in the middle, which is the existing access which the proposal will utilise. Again, looking south, you can see the existing access from this photo. And another one, views to the rear of number 18 and views to the west. So the original application was refused regarding issues on the impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area and setting of the listed building. The main issue was the original proposal sought to demolish the majority of the brick and flint wall which enclosed the site. The inspector dismissed the appeal and agreed that the loss of the wall would have a detrimental impact. The current proposal, as I say, sees the entirety of the wall retained with an existing access utilised, therefore overcoming the issues of the previous application. The main considerations are the highway safety, impact on amenity and landscaping. So if we look to approve the application today, it would be subject to the submission of a revised agricultural impact assessment, as the one currently submitted on the application references the previous layout. This information can be, what we would do is we would come to a recommendation today, wait for that to be submitted, and then we could issue an approval as per recommendation. The officer's report also touches on some clarification required regarding the baseline of the site for biodiversity net gain. Again, this is something that we could look at once the application has been decided and could be dealt with as part of discharge of condition. So this is a list of the proposed conditions, mainly relating to the materials, details of flint samples, windows and doors. We've also got removal of permitted development rights. And again, as I say, the biodiversity net gain plan, which is a standard condition. So the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice and concise, very clear as always. Thank you. We have no parish speaker, no objecting speaker. I have one supporting speaker, Vincent Fitzpatrick. I'm sure you know the procedures.
Good morning, Chair, members and officers. I'm Vincent Fitzpatrick, the applicant, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning to support my application. My intention is to provide a high-quality home near to the centre of the vibrant village of Walsingham. My designers have taken into account the site's planning history, including the planning inspector's comments, to devise a scheme without harm to the heritage assets of the conservation area and the nearby listed buildings. The use of the existing vehicle entrance ensures that the boundary wall is preserved in its current form. I'd like to call out some important features of this scheme, which include the new building being in keeping with the built environment of the neighbouring buildings, which are a mix of old and new. There'll be no harm to heritage assets. Using the existing vehicle entrance ensures that the existing boundary wall is preserved. It provides a high quality dwelling with adequate amenity space. It is situated in a sustainable location near to the centre, to the village centre, with shops, cafes, pubs, and a regular bus services to both Fakenham and Wells. I'd like to thank the case officer for the recommendation for approval, and I'd ask that members would approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. No local member speaking. Okay, couple of things I recall from previously looking at this. There was some concern over the vehicle manoeuvring space, I believe. Are you able to comment on that? That's now deemed adequate given the revised parking.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the original site plan, which was submitted as part of this application, did actually show 2 spaces to the front of the property. Following discussions with the applicant as well as the tree officer, in order to provide sufficient replacement planting, which you can see on the site plan on the screen, it has been reduced down to 1 parking space, which is acceptable given the site's location within a settlement boundary and a conservation area. So I think that will make the parking more achievable. And we've had also no objections from the Highways Authority. So we are of the opinion that the parking should be sufficient.
Okay, thank you. Members. Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel a bit like Groundhog Day on this one, and I seem to remember when it came up before, very close to this application, there's like a large, reasonably new flats and apartments, which we don't see on this. But now I'm looking through everything here. There's no objections from anybody, actually no one apart from landscaping. So I'm quite happy to pose this one for approval.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Well, I've just moved to Walsingham actually, and it's a beautifully preserved medieval village, but it's very much a living and thriving village. I know that the parish council hasn't made any direct objection. It's just mentioned a need for family homes, and there are large families in Walsingham, but there's also people in my generation who are single or couples who need modern homes that are easy to heat and easy to maintain, but are nevertheless sympathetic to the environment of Walsingham. So, I mean, I am very happy to second Councillor Mancini-Boyle's proposal, because I think this would be an addition. It's only a 2-bedroom house, but couples and single people need homes too, and they need homes that are viable, not the sort of rather drafty one that I've just bought.
Very good. Councillor Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, thank you to the case officer for the thorough report. It's quite clear that the applicant has worked on this newer application. It's encouraging that there's relevant details there and support. Obviously, I have concern over the objection regarding trees and the landscaping, but it's encouraging that in the list of constraints, if we were minded to support it, conditions, should I say, sorry, that those details will be forthcoming. I think that's fundamental. So based on all of that, I'm more than happy to support.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's, it's unfortunate that this application has been brought to us by a scenic route. It's taken an appeal, which, one wonders whether this particular application we have in front of us today could have come before us earlier to avoid an appeal, but we are where we are with it. I just want to raise one issue about the arboricultural impact assessment report. Is these come at considerable cost, and I think there's a previous one that was lodged with the initial application, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that could be salvaged from that original AIA report to, as it were, in the interest of the applicant, reduce the expense to the applicant, given its scenic route and there's been considerable expense getting to this point.
Mr. Williams.
I'll try and choose my words reasonably carefully. The scenic route is not unusual in as much as this is not the first application at the first council where somebody has proposed something that has been refused, gone off to appeal. The council is successful in the appeal, but the appeal decision effectively provides a threshold, arguably even a target, I suppose, for the applicant to respond to, which is what has happened in this case. So we've reviewed the current proposal effectively against the history, but particularly the appeal decision, and believe that the applicant has addressed all the, let's just call it, outstanding issues, most of which relate to the wall, if I'm honest. Just switching to the second part of Councillor Brown's observation, what we will be seeking is what I might call an updated statement on the trees rather than a going back to scratch statement of the trees, because the proposal has changed since origins, and unlike other things, I suppose, trees tend to be there for a while and probably haven't changed much in the last year or two, shall we say. So, I'm not anticipating what I might call a full start from scratch assessment needing to be done. And I've asked the case officer to just clarify with the applicant after today's meeting, if you go with it, as to exactly the sort of things we're looking for. And this isn't meant as a criticism. This is before committee purely because of the ownership background of the site, as it should be when there is an involvement of a councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday, then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you. There was quite a lot of discussion last time, wasn't there, about a historic orchard? I noticed that the inspector didn't pay much attention to the actual loss of trees. He didn't think it was the wall that he was worried about. I'd just like to point out there is one objection actually from a neighbour who finds it less than palatable, just for the records. So I think we do need the arboricultural assessment, because that was a bit of an issue for me, and I would only vote for this if I knew that there was going to be a reasonably detailed proposal coming through.
Can I just make one other observation? And I'm not going to go into any detail on the merits or otherwise of the trees or the orchard, or whether it is even an orchard, but effectively, from my perspective, the inspector has made that decision already by their previous taken position on the subject, and for the council to now take a different view. I appreciate you're not espousing that would be very difficult. Equally, if the inspector had chucked out the previous appeal on the grounds of saying, for sake of argument, that is a hugely important orchard and must be maintained at all costs, we probably wouldn't be here with this recommendation today, but they didn't.
Thank you. Can we go to the vote, please?
Councillor Beattie.
For, subject to conditions.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitztillett. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holliday. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle. Councillor Netherway. Councillor J Toy.
4.
Councillor K Toy. 4. Councillor Varley. Councillor Vickers. 4.
Application is approved. You've got there finally. Okay, we've had a request for a short break now, so we'll take 10 minutes. And we have one application and the usual additions. Yep. Okay, colleagues, let me see to the last items. That's another way. Okay, the last substantive decision for today is Melton Constable PF/23/0775. Officer Smith, if you can present, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Yeah, the application proposes the conversion of a barn to a dwelling, including associated external works to a barn at Greens Farm at Hindlevester Road in Melton Constable. The application is brought to committee because the agent is a close relation to a member of the planning team. In terms of the application, it has been delayed due to nutrient neutrality, where officers are quite pleased that credits have now become available to mitigate applications such as this, subject to confirmation that the credits are purchased and further consultation with Natural England. In terms of the site context, the building is located on the east side of Hindlevester Road. It sits adjacent to a traditional barn complex that's already got planning permission and is almost finished, as I understand. And to the north, the east and the west of the barn are open fields. Following are just a couple of photographs just to show the building itself and the context of the site. As you can see, the building is covered in corrugated roofing with grey cladding to the walls. And in terms of the site context, you can see it's set against the traditional barns in the open countryside. In terms of the site layout, the application site is in red with the adjoining land in blue, owned by the applicant. It sits to the northeast of the traditional farm complex, and it's got a modest south-facing garden provision with an integral garage as detailed in the floor plan that we will see a little bit later. In terms of the elevations, it's single story, retains its single story nature. Its scale and its form, that remains the same. The building proposes replacement cladding for the roof of a similar nature of corrugated nature and timber cladding for the walls. Officers consider this to be an improvement to the existing appearance of the building and to the wider side, and would in effect complement the form and character of the adjacent traditional farm complex. In terms of the floor plan, it proposes a modest 3-bedroom dwelling with a combined living area and an integral garage. And in terms of the main issues for considerations, these are on in front of you, and the officer report is on page 65 to 74, including all the representations and quantity responses. And the following is a reminder of the issue to consider. I'll briefly just cover these for you. The first one being the principal development. Now, the building, it's important to note the building has an extant approval under what we call as a Class Q, which is a conversion of a barn to a dwelling under what is under permitted development. In simple terms, a Class Q allows for the conversion of a building to a dwelling under permitted development, not planning permission, subject to conditions and limitations which the application did meet at the time. Officers have given significant weight to this approval as what we call as a fallback. It's a scheme that already has permission and has a realistic prospect of coming forward. In terms of the character and appearance of the barn, we feel that the improvements proposed would be an enhancement to the building itself and to the wider setting. In terms of amenity, highway and safety and ecological impacts, there are no objections subject to conditions. I will, however, note in terms of ecology, there is a slight change on page 77 of the report. The application proposes an independent installation of a PTP and the purchase of credits, as opposed to the replacement of the existing PTP, which is associated with the barn. That was a mistake on my part, so apologies. So in effect, the barn is independent, a new PTP with the purchase of credits, which will mitigate in association with nutrient neutrality. In terms of the recommendation, approval is recommended as outlined on page 74 of the committee report. The slight change to condition 3, instead of PTP upgrade, it will be PTP installation. Presentation is concluded. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Nice and clear and concise. I have no parry speaker, no objecting speaker, one supporting speaker, Dr. Michelle Lyon, here to come to the front.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Michelle Lyon and I'm the agent for the application. This scheme before you today would provide the same dwelling as the extant permitted development approval, but with an improved appearance. So as the officer has already set out, the differences are that the roof cladding would be renewed but remain the same appearance, a metal clad roof. The walls would be different because instead of the cementous boarding there, we're proposing timber cladding. Both of these would improve the appearance of the building in this location. The officer has obviously helpfully set out in the report how the barn currently benefits from permitted development approval for exactly the same dwelling, but retaining the wall and roof cladding, and that this falls a fallback position and is a material consideration to which significant weight should be attached. This fallback position in similar circumstances has also been attributed significant weight in other comparable cases, including within this district. It should also be noted that in 2020, planning permission was granted to convert the neighbouring brick barns to 4 dwellings. Those barns unconverted, along with the current application before you today, were then sold to the applicant. The applicant considered that the historic brick barns would benefit from being converted to just 3 dwellings rather than 4, and that this would better respect the historic brick barns. Planning permission has achieved for that, and the conversion is almost complete. The applicant then proposed the 4th dwelling within the barn before you today. Consequently, this proposal plus the neighbouring now converted brick barns results in 4 dwellings in this location. This is the same number as were approved in this location in 2020. Consequently, the total number of dwellings in this location would be unchanged as a result of this application. 4 barns here was approved in 2020. The existing 3 barns converted next door plus the extant prior approval equals 4 dwellings in this location. Sales of the converted neighbouring brick barns have not been achieved yet, and the uncertainty that has hung over the barn under consideration today due to nutrient neutrality has not facilitated that sale process. And had it not been for nutrient neutrality, the barn you're considering today would have been converted by now. There is an extant permitted development for it that the applicant was keen to implement and finish this development. Now that credits have been offered by Norfolk Environmental Credits, the applicant is in the process of obtaining that required credit certificate and will be able to submit that to the council shortly. Therefore, both the permitted development scheme and the scheme before you today can fully meet the nutrient neutrality requirements for this site. The applicant is very keen to progress the scheme for this barn and complete the site. They're in a position to progress without delay and to provide the 4th home and remove the uncertainty affecting both this site and the neighbouring barns due to nutrient neutrality. Thank you.
We have local member, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's relatively rare, I think, for this committee to be looking at an application of this type, an amended Part Q, with a proposal that will actually improve what the government through permitted development thinks is right for North Norfolk. Views may vary with the government on that. And it's good that we have progress with Norfolk Environmental Credits. I declared an interest being on the working party of the Norfolk Mitigation Fund that deals with that side of things. And of course, you know, the applicant will have been somewhat frustrated, and I think we share that frustration about the intervention and the manner of the intervention from the government back in 2020. But we are where we are, and I'm not going to stray, you'll be pleased to know, into what I think of that arrangement inflicted on us by the previous government. So what's good about this is that we're beginning to see, we did have an application recently, I think in Bristol, which was a sort of an early indicator that things are beginning to move, you know, the septic tank upgrade scheme, where loans have been given, you know, non-repayable loans, as it were, to people who want to upgrade their septic tanks. And this will have a package treatment plant which will serve the purpose, an additional one, as we've heard from the agent. So I think there's not much really more to say about this, given the extant Part Q permission to it. It is what it is in that respect, and I have little hesitation in offering this for approval. So I will propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Brown's said most of the reasons why we should approve this. I would like to just offer some comments to put into the public domain. One is that the applicant, I understand with the other buildings not been built out yet, cash flow may be an issue, but I think there was a great opportunity to cover one of the roofs in solar panels and the other side in Sedum that's near the pond. So there could have been a greater improvement in what's been delivered, and I hope they consider that going forward. In terms of the environmental credits, I appreciate the work that everybody's doing, but actually I keep tropical fish, and if you measure the phosphates that are coming out of the tap, never mind what we do with them, that when you rinse something off, it goes straight down the drain, they're higher than we expect in our rivers. So I think the environmental credits thing is there's a whole load more there that we haven't even investigated. And I just wanted to put that in the public domain, and thank you for giving me that opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of order, really. I'm surprised that Councillor Brown would mention the previous government's stance on national neutrality. Surely that's a good thing. Why were you against it at the time? Because I thought it was a great thing to clean up our rivers and streams, and you seem to think it's not a good idea.
I think that's the debate that can be taken outside this meeting, councillors. So, we're here to make a decision on the planning application.
I didn't say that, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I need words putting into my mouth on this, but I'm quite happy to speak to my Councillor Mancini-Boyle offline about it at some length.
I'm sure you will, no doubt. Okay, I have a proposal. Do I have a second? The recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Fisher. I'll take it first. Okay, can we go to the vote, please?
Councillor Beattie.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor MacDonald.
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
For.
Councillor Netherway. Councillor J-Toy.
For.
Councillor K-Toy. For. Councillor Varley. Councillor Vickers.
For.
Okay, the application is approved. Okay. Okay, you'll note, I think, that the final forms, etc. items are more limited than usual. I'm sure explanation for that shortly. If we can just take item 12 first, the performance. It all looks very positive to me. We're maintaining our record and improving on it. Williams may have something to add to that.
No, I'm covering it. Ms. Croxton. No, basically, I don't have anything to add to that. The data looks fine from my perspective. It continues recent trends. I would just observe that we appear to be getting more major applications and more interest in house building coming forward at the moment. There's a couple of councillors in the room who represent wards that have had the largest application that this council's seen for a while come forward just south of Cromer, but as others are wont to point out, predominantly in either Rowton or Poppy land wards. But I'm expecting, as the local plan process winds to its conclusion, that is the start of a trend rather than a blip. Although, if I'm honest, I doubt many will be of the scale of that particular one at 550 homes. But the performance remains solid. Platinum, to misquote Councillor Brown.
And spectacular.
Of course, we will be getting the much larger application on North Walsham West at some point. So it's going to be interesting times for this committee over the next 18 months. Yes. And we're going to have some interesting decisions to be making. I don't think there are things we can discuss at this moment, but I think we all know how we're starting to feel about the what I would regard as the overdevelopment of our district. Okay, S106.
The Kedleston Road is completed and we're just awaiting the documents back from McDonald's, who have been as quick to agree the 106 as they have to prepare burgers. So thank you, McDonald's.
It was flipped, was it? Very quickly. Okay, we haven't had the usual report on appeals and such. Mr. Williams will just give us a verbal update on that.
So yes, apologies for that. Just for awareness, there has only been one decision received in the last period since this was last reported to you, which was for those that are into these things, PU/24/0753. If anybody wishes to read it, it related to a site in Binham in Priory Ward and was an interesting read, actually. So I'll say the reference number again for anybody who might be interested in some of the rules and assessments around converting agricultural buildings under permitted development rights. I found it an unusually educational read. That's not to be dismissive of other decision notices, but that's PU/24/0753. But it did agree with the council.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the agenda. We do have a couple of other items we just need to go through as a committee offline. We can formally close the meeting.